Good morning, hello, and good evening if you are in the European area. Welcome, and let's have a nice hour of communication and conversation with our guest, Sam Gupta. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me, Ralph and Thomas. Great to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you with us. And after I give a quick introduction to you, Sam, you fill up a bit and tell us more about all the stuff I have missed. Such as I was curious after you have done broadcast together with some analysts where you are getting wild on some topics and you have some podcasts which found my interest, and I'm still curious on this one. And you have been in several industries as industry analyst and thought leader in the digital transformation space for nearly 2 decades, with a primary focus on business systems and enterprise architecture. You have been involved with over 200 digital transformation strategy and implementation projects. And man, that's a pound to say so. You have pretty much on your map what you have seen. And that was one of the things which is driving me forward, that we are excited and curious where you, for instance, are driving through those different commerce strategies and their developments. But firstly, I would like to ask and learn, what is ElevatIQ's mission? And then feel free to add a bit on your personal agenda and your business life before. Welcome again.
Thank you so much. And you did a wonderful job in describing my background as well as career path, I guess. So I'll focus more on ElevatIQ. Just a little bit. I'll keep it super short. So ElevatIQ, what we do, we are more of the buy-side advisory as well as analyst firm. So our focus is more from the digital transformation strategy, system selection. We do procurement for customers, they come to us. Then we have some of the analyst side offerings as well for the enterprise software vendors. Those are going to be things such as your reprints, supporting go-to-market strategy. So that now ElevatIQ's mission has always been, because we have seen many different things in the industry, and we always believed that it needed some change overall. So we created ElevatIQ Forum primarily in embedding a lot of subject matter expertise, I guess. Before, when we were on the other side, on the implementation side, when we were looking at these RFPs, they did not have as much subject matter expertise, the industry layer. So that's what we sort of bring to the table in our analyst offerings as well. Our offerings are much deeper, I would say, in the industry, the size segments. So that's where I guess we found the gap, and that's what we are trying to fill. Overall, we are independent vendor agnostic, so we are not affiliated with anybody, and the customers care for that. There are only so many companies in the market that are truly independent. So we found that gap, and that's what we wanted to fill.
Cool. That is a gap still existing, and I hope that it keeps open for a long time, so that we all are still kept busy and in bread and butter and something to drink for the earnings we would like to receive from our customers and potential customers. And aside of the brief introduction we have had now, it's interesting to see where do you see in the difference between the business models we were talking and are starting to talk about, B2B, B2C, B2B2C, and to add one on, if you have governmental business to do, where are there the core differentiators you have experienced?
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining, John, Tony. And I don't know whether you want to call this wild or grumpy. Sometimes we go wild, sometimes
Make it
grumpy.
wild.
We are all analysts, right? So, okay, so I'll start on my
And
grumpiness
fast.
now.
We can dub it consultants going wild instead of analysts.
Exactly,
Create a new
exactly.
franchise here.
So coming back to your question in differences in the business model, and I guess the way we like to see this, we always start more from the business model perspective, business processes, and in our experience, that drives the enterprise architecture and that defines which components you are going to need. And when you look at the system categories, CRM, ERP, sometimes they could be all over the place. If you have clarity in your business model, then you'll be able to do much better job in terms of which system is going to have a place where. Now, B2B versus B2C is a very unique nuance, right? This is only, we are probably talking about just the commerce industries. If you really look at B2B versus B2C, I don't know if you would bundle, let's say, the service industries inside B2B as well. Sometimes these services could be consumer too, depending upon how you see it. But for the most part, there is going to be one segmentation between product versus service. And then in that, you are going to have different segmentation between B2B and B2C. Now, if you're simply talking about the product industries are very different in general compared to the service industries. Your architecture is going to be very different. The state of CRM is going to be very different. The state of ERP is going to be very different. So let's focus on the product industries first, and then if you want to come back to service industries, we can talk about their business model as well. So from the product perspective, let's say if you look at B2C. Now, B2C, which industries are you going to have? You are probably going to have retail. You are going to have e-commerce. Now, for these, let's talk about their sort of the architecture. For the most part, these two industries, and I'm probably going to make some controversial comments here, which I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to get some pushback. Okay. So retail and e-commerce industries, if you really look at the traditional state of these industries, even the larger organizations, okay, they very rarely had an ERP and very rarely CRM as well. The majority of their the business process state was residing in that whole, what do you call, the POS layer, the merchandising, the planning, the supply chain, the WMS, the supply chain suite. This whole state was carrying the majority of the process. The only relevance of ERP was in this whole financial reporting, which can probably be done by your FP&A software or some sort of accounting software. You don't need a true ERP to manage this. So now B2C industry was very, very, very interesting, right? Now, if you combine e-commerce, depending upon whether you are a pure play e-commerce or are you just a 10% e-commerce business, if you are that, then your state is going to be very different in terms of how you are going to marry these two business models together. In general, 90% of the businesses that we have, they have always segmented these two. Even there was an organizational divide that, okay, this is my e-commerce team and this is my physical retail team. I don't know whether you guys have experienced this or not, right? So that is your B2C. Now, B2B is different. Now, depending upon which B2B you are talking about, if you are talking about slightly more industrial B2B, then they are going to be very different. Okay, sometimes these B2B companies may have distributors, then they are going to have very different business model. If that is more of the, depending upon which ecosystem are they part of automotive, aerospace, then it's going to be a very different state. In these industries, you are going to find much thicker ERP, much thicker CRM, and in fact, much thicker e-commerce as well. Because for them, the transaction is very different. The way their pricing discounting is going to work is very different. The way their customer hierarchy is, it's very different. So that's going to be your, B2B, I guess. And then you have B2B2C. That's even more, interesting beast, I guess. So depending upon whether you are shoving all of this inside one business, if you are, then you are going to have very different business model again, because you have 2 or 3 different business models. And when you combine these business models, generally 90% of the systems are not very enterprise grade, right? So they are not going to be able to accommodate as many business models, as many business transactions. So if you are making your business model so thick, then you are going to need much thicker systems as well, and that becomes very expensive. Sometimes you are going to have adoption challenges. So I don't know, I spoke a lot, so I don't know if I gave you the information that you were looking for, but I'll stop here, I guess.
Yeah, let's look at as we already
Our audience.
we got the audience wild. So let's start with Tony and then get into what John just texted, I guess, or said, wrote a little earlier. So complexities are way different. Yeah, decision making is, well, depends on where he's looking at. So many more people are involved in decision making and purchasing processes in B2B. And what John says is here, there is a difference. Lines have blurred. I actually would agree to some extent on that, challenging Tony a little by saying there is quite a difference in purchasing a house to purchasing, well, a can of corn or whatever. Yeah. So
or car.
Yeah, well, the car is somewhere in between. But
yeah,
because, well, usually I don't know how it's in Germany these days, but houses here are still more expensive than cars.
Yeah, if you're not in Rolls Royce, and you have another differentiator if you go into services, such as if you look for an insurance.
So how is that reflected on system level?
Sorry, that's a question. So
yeah, that's a question. So how is this variety of complexities, how and this blurring, how is that reflected on system level? So you might have highly complex B2C sales processes or commerce processes and extremely simple B2B purchasing processes.
Yeah, so it's easy to say that lines are getting blurred, and it's easy to sort of think that, you know what, let's just blur the lines from today onwards, because that's what everybody is doing. But when you do that, you have to make substantial changes in your business processes, as well as the cost of systems is going to be much more. So let's talk about the traditional B2B business model, for example. And, I think John is talking about the customer experience of B2C as well.
Yeah.
So when you talk about B2B, the traditional business model was easier, easier from the financial planning perspective. Okay, I have this product I'm selling through my distributor. I'm probably give them 30% cut. I'm only going to give them when I make a sale. It's going to be much easier for me as the finance guy to be able to manage this, right? Now, when you combine the whole B2C layer, now we are talking about a lot more digital experiences. And in general, changing that requires a lot more thought process in how you are going to enable all of that. So you might feel that you are combining all of this, but from the process and the cost planning perspective, you need to plan a lot more. So lines are getting blurred, but it's also very difficult, is what I would say. If you have to do that, make sure you are planning for all of those cost elements, because somebody has to pay the bills, right? So let's say if you go back to the traditional process where you are maybe you had 30-40% margin, and in that you gave to your distributors 20%. So what do you have left? So how do you accommodate the whole B2C experience? Who's going to pay the bills, I guess? So that is always my personal question, to be completely honest, when I look at these business models.
So following John's first point, what do you think B2C can teach B2B?
So this is also a very interesting question, and I always like to go back to who's going to pay the bills, I guess, and what is the cost of customer experience. It's always nice. Yeah. So we talk about value, which is great, but are customers willing to pay extra for that added customer experience? I'll take my personal example. Okay. Never, right, Ralph? I mean, this. Okay. We all complain that, we want better airline experience. We all want better experience at retail stores. But when it comes to our own price sensitivity, we are substantially price sensitive in general. I would say 80% of the people. So now the question becomes, are customers willing to pay? If they are willing to pay, do it, because that is going to provide you the competitive edge. And hopefully your customers are worse than you, then obviously, hopefully you can command the higher price. But commanding the higher price purely based on customer experience is harder. I'm not going to say that it's not possible. It's just harder.
Let's that one must come.
Yeah.
So you should stop flying, John. Let's talk a little user experience less than customer experience, because this is one of the important aspects as well. So what you're basically saying, and I now turn your words a little in your mouth, is that you're either paying for a better experience or for a better ERP. And that I doubt, because my premise here is if you don't modernize your processes, your ERP, or your systems in general, in a way that users have an easier life, you won't get an easier life for your customers. Means I would say that it's not a contradiction, or not the contradiction that you seem to imply.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting argument as well. And in our experience, and we come from very adoption, change management centric world, right? So in our world, when you look at the personal experiences or the personal expectations of the users, they all are very different. And just because you are going to modernize the technology, it does not mean that they are always going to be happier, and that does not necessarily translate into better customer experience. So again, you have already invested the money, but is that going to result in some sort of financial outcome for yourself as well as for your customers? That is going to be a question. And that is the question that we generally ask. So again, we are not sort of against modernizing the technology, but what we talk about is really understand the preferences, where the complaint is coming from. Is it just a rent, or do they have real problems? If they have real problems, obviously, if you're using something like mainframe, then you probably need to think about it. But if you are going to have just the marginal improvement in system, and let's say if you are not investing in implementation, sometimes the net effect may not be as much as you would think, from the technology perspective.
I want just to jump in that perspective, knowing the food and retail business quite well from my old days, with 2% of margin and no longer technology advantages like you had in the old metro cash and carry times in the 80s, that with a smart IT system and well thought and modeled processes, you could save a fortune, and you would know exactly how much in which subsidiary and which product in each branch you have sold at the end of the day. That was miracle-like. But now this is standard. So where is the next cutting edge in innovation or in getting me a better margin if I am the shop owner or the filialist who is driving this? And where is my experience getting better or less good if there is too much automation, such as these bloody automatic cash out systems, which try to work properly, but I always get them to goof. Yeah?
Exactly. So I think the point here is, I guess, when you look at the state of retail, even today, despite advancements in technology, when you look at the connection points of each of the systems and the processes that they might be using, they are substantially disconnected even as of today, even though a lot of companies are going to claim that, they have frictionless in integration between processes, systems. That's not how the real world works. For example, I mean, there was a big debate. I think John was there, John or Phil from Diginomica. We were debating about the whole Mac ecosystem, and I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with that. And these guys are talking about, hey, we are going to make everything composable. We are going to fragment every single technology, and we are going to provide cutting edge experience. The example that I like to give is, I went to Home Depot one of these days, and I was looking at, okay, can I get my delivery done from the store, because I just could not carry what I bought there.
Mhm.
So then I asked them, okay, so they said, you know what, this is a cashier line. Okay, this system is not designed to handle this. You need to go there. Okay, there meaning there was a system in the corner somewhere. Okay, so I was like, okay, why the hell am I going there? What's going on? I mean, can you not process here? So I went there. Okay, this particular, and there was a specialized talent to process this transaction in a Mackie system. So number one, you need a special talent to be able to handle that, because you are going to get 5 or 10 different defects before you can process one single order. Can you believe this? Now let's talk about customer experience here, right? So I went there and I waited at least 45 minutes. Can you believe this? 45 minutes in 2024 or 2025. And when we have these big claims of technology doing miracles, but as a customer, what am I getting? Okay, I am wasting my 45 minutes standing in the line. My order is still not getting delivered. So do I really want this, to be completely honest? And you are talking about, all those frictionless, the shopping aisle. Great idea. But are your processes going to be connected? Are your systems going to be connected? And for that, what you need is the mindset change. Because unless you do that, because the problem is not necessarily related to technology. Technology is capable. The question is going to be, are people willing to use that? Are people willing to adopt? Are people willing to implement the architecture the way they are supposed to be implemented? And that's where the major problems are. So you go across the industries, these problems are going to be consistent. And again, these are all related to technology adoption. They are not necessarily related to technology.
Now, looking a bit more on the B2B side, so you just had a customer success failure, a personal one. So no, customer success in a B2B setting, or in a larger setting of B2B, is something where I'd even say 3 parties need to play team sport, because they usually, if it's an implementation, there's also an SI usually involved. They are all not necessarily aligned and have their own interests, probably even different systems. How shall that be addressed?
Yeah, so I guess, again, even in this case, you have to go back to your fundamentals. And that is going to be related to business processes, core business strategy. Are your business processes aligned to that strategy? And then finally figure out which systems you are going to need. Unless those systems are going to be aligned with the expectations of the users, the way users have this mapped in their heads. Okay, they are going to do what they are going to do. So again, I don't think this is the argument between vendors versus customers versus whoever. I don't care. Again, the whole alignment is where the real play is. That's where the chemistry is in our experience. So the more aligned your efforts are going to be in general, that's where hopefully you can find some success there. But even today, what I'm going to say is technology implementations are very hard, even though technology is way easier. The implementation itself, they are very hard just because of the people issues for the most part.
People. Mm-hmm.
Who needs people in a world of agentic AI?
We can talk about that as well.
We will. Trust us. Trust us.
But seriously, so there are a bunch, looking at those 3 pillars. Let's start with 3, and not government to consumer or government to business, or whatever we can think of here. There are different systems which need to be connected differently. probably, or with different priorities. So where do you see the impacts of, one could say the ERP is the core part of it, although I'm a CRM guy, so it makes my heart bleed a little, but for business, the ERP stays the core system. So how do you see a need for different integration points between these different business models and the different importance of these integration points?
Yeah, and when you start looking this more from the enterprise architecture perspective, I guess you need to define the roles and responsibilities of each of these systems, and you need to define the core priorities of business. And when I say core priorities, what I mean is, do you want to run your operations in a consolidated manner or in the siloed manner? Both strategies could be fine, but they have their pros and cons in terms of how you want to run. So when you start any business, and we talk about a lot of financial inflection points, we can talk about that if you want. But when you start a business, in general, you don't need consolidated state. So let's say if you're going to be roughly $10, $20 million business, for that, you don't need consolidated state, because generally one person is probably running the majority of the cross-functional processes. That's generally going to be founder, CEO, whatever, right? And then the majority of the people, they are going to be independent. They are running their own operations. So you don't necessarily need the consolidated state. And the team is so small that you don't really have the operational efficiency issues. But as you grow, you need to consolidate your operations. So in this state, you can have 3 different CRMs, 3 different ERPs. Who cares? You can have 5 different systems. You can run as you like, because copying data from one system to the next is not going to be as much. I mean, you can probably figure out some sort of automation, and that's how the 90% of the smaller companies, they are running on SaaS. That's how they are operating. But when you are going to be of substantial size, that's when you need to figure out some sort of consolidation. And again, the consolidation is going to be, okay, do you want your CRMs to be consolidated? Do you want your ERPs to be consolidated? In general, the CRM architecture is easier. The reason for that is because your data sets that you have, they don't need to be as consolidated. You don't have as many financial issues that you are going to have in the ERP state. And that's why ERP becomes slightly harder in general, because everything needs to be very, very, very tightly embedded, because you are reconciling every single transaction to a penny. If you lose one social media message, who cares? Nobody cares. But if you lose a penny, then somebody's going to care.
The marketer probably does.
They do, but I mean, the issues are not as severe. But here, you could argue about this in the accounting as well. Okay, you can write off. Maybe
the importance is different.
Exactly. So again, to your question, okay, which system is going to be the core? That's where you need to go back to your fundamentals. Okay, do you want your sales and marketing teams to be operating in a siloed manner? And what is going to be the scope of sales and marketing? What all are they doing? What all do you want to keep inside your CRM estate? And then what is going to be the handshake? That handshake is going to define what is going to be the state of ERP. And again, it's not going to be the battle between CRM versus ERP. It's going to be 50 different systems that you are generally using. If you go to B2B manufacturing organization, they are going to have PLM, CAD. They are probably going to have MES. So how are you going to fight that battle? Okay, if you go to retail, you are going to have supply chain suite, WMS, TMS, POS. So how are you going to fight that? It's never about just the CRM versus ERP. It's a lot more. So again, that's where the whole exercise of enterprise architecture is going to be handy. But enterprise architecture can only be successful once your business model is clarified. And the idea of clarifying or cleansing your business model is going to be the way you would design your organizational structure. When you design your organizational structure, you have very clear expectations. Okay, what HR is supposed to do, what your IT is supposed to do, what your finance is supposed to do. In most cases, right? There is always going to be overstepping, etc. But that's how you design your business model. And based on the business model or the operating model, then you need to find out, okay, what is going to be your enterprise architecture? And that dictates the state. Okay, which system is going to be more important? Which system is going to be sort of the the source of authority from the data perspective, because you have to design all of your reconciliation model. What is going to be the cost of that? So you need to do this exercise collectively. Again, it's not one system versus other. It's the holistic approach that you need to take.
Looking at alignment and all those topics that you just brought up. One thing is for sure, you're doing any project only based upon hopefully a couple of KPIs that you want to change and improve, which hopefully are not only cost, yeah, or being on time and on budget and on quality with your project. So you basically want to improve something for your customer, which means that customers should own the KPIs, which is quite an interesting idea there, especially if you tie that to pricing models, when it becomes really interesting. So how can something like this be set up? How valuable do you see an idea like this?
Yeah, so I guess the KPIs are interesting, but where we find real problems is people don't even know how to define the real KPIs that can be measured, because there are going to be differences in the definition. So when they talk about any KPIs, these two could have very different interpretation of the same KPI. So how do you align that expectation? That is going to be the first step in identifying the KPI. The customers that we deal with, to be completely honest, they don't necessarily have the KPI. They don't start with KPIs. Okay, we might tell them that, okay, hey, let's come up with some KPIs, but then the definition could vary for those KPIs as well. So again, the whole exercise is aligning the expectation in terms of what are we trying to achieve. The KPIs are great, but sometimes, I mean, they could be all over the place as well, depending upon how you design it.
Well, if KPI is all about measurement, if you're asking what do we want to achieve, you somehow need to be able to measure level of achievement.
Yeah, so in our world, when you talk about change management and when you talk about real happiness, joy, from whatever you are doing, it's more than data points, because some things are going to be unsaid. People just don't say things. So how do you identify those resistances that are deeply buried in people's hearts, in their heads, right? So once you identify those, and if you don't, and they sort of come back, they fire back later in the downstream process. So we go slightly deeper, I would say, in understanding those challenges, where those resistances are coming from. If somebody has any sort of objections, okay, what are those? And we try to map out those risks, before it becomes late. Obviously, the KPIs are important as well, but KPIs alone, sometimes, I mean, we struggle with that, because if you are using that as a guidepost, you might miss the mark, because you are not necessarily understanding the behavior of people in terms of why they are not saying things. So that's where our take is on this topic, I would say.
Okay, now I'm yanking your chain again. So what you are saying now, or what I hear now, is don't bother with any KPIs, just do something.
I'm definitely not saying that. What I'm saying is, just don't blindly follow KPIs. Have KPIs, but look at the meaning of KPIs more than anything else. Don't go by the literal definition of KPI. It's not supposed to be a very technical argument or technical job. With the system implementation, in our experience, it's much more than that. You are dealing with people. Unless you are designing some sort of technical system that is exposed to the external user. For example, let's say we talk about e-commerce systems. They're different, okay? Because you just don't have the same issue there. There you are exposing a website, people are using it, you have some sort of data that you can collect, you can measure, monitor. Those are different systems. But here, when you talk about internal systems, the process-related systems, the transactional systems, they are slightly different.
So the users don't matter. That's what I'm hearing now.
That's not what I'm saying. Users matter, and that's why I'm saying that you need to really read them. Okay, if you simply look at data, you might miss the issues that users are going to have. So what I'm saying is, nothing matters more than users. Users are.
So means we are talking user satisfaction, which is a KPI.
We are talking users as a sorry, go ahead.
Which is a KPI.
Sorry, so I'm not able to follow the question. Maybe repeat that. So
user matter, and usually happy users are working more effectively and more efficiently too. beziehungsweise, but falling back to German, that rarely happens. Usually it's the other way around for me, meanwhile. So the point for me seems to be that if I don't help my users becoming happy, then they are doing a crappy job for their customers. Means, again, to users are happy, but I don't see that ERP systems, unless they are totally and fully automated, are any different than externally facing systems. Why should they be? Should that be?
Yeah, so I guess the reason why they are different is because, again, you are dealing with users and politics, and with the external systems, you don't have that. It's slightly different because you are dealing with customers. You might have different issues because they are not going to transact. So there you are going to get much more data that, okay, if they are not happy, they are simply going to go to your competitors, right? So that's a different problem. So there, data becomes far more important. But here, things could be different because what might happen is, let's say if users are not happy, they will say on your face that they're okay, they are happy, but internally they are not happy. So what they are going to do is they might say that, you know what, this implementation is a success, but then they are never going to use the system because you are not necessarily watching over their shoulders, right? So they are going to go back and they are now not going to use the system. They might use some sort of spreadsheet in the background, and then you are not going to get the data and insights and the KPIs that you hope that you are going to get. So this is where the real difference is. When you are dealing with customers, when you are dealing with external users, you don't have as much politics, I guess, because they are not forced.
Choice,
yeah, exactly.
So
A happy, accepting user in the organization can create easier, from my perspective, a happy customer.
Exactly. And happiness cannot be enforced. It cannot be, what is that? What is the term?
Can be
Mechanicalized.
Yeah.
Exactly. AI cannot bring happiness. Happiness is far more than just automation. Yeah.
we are talking value, which is another KPI, by the way. So which can be tracked, and usage of the system, by the way, can be tracked too. So if I find that a lot of stuff comes via an Excel, then I have an indicator that goes down to whatever KPI there is. Now, having said that, I'm a believer in KPIs, by the way. And I'm also a believer in streamlining then into strategic KPIs, means a hierarchy. So all of these can be tracked, and all of these can be agreed upon. So why not starting with, at least in a B2B setting, in a B2C setting for scale, it's probably a bit more difficult, but why not first agreeing on a value proposition, which is, and the measurement of this value proposition before one starts any endeavor?
Exactly. So I'm not disagreeing with that at all, to be completely honest. I mean, that has to be the first thing. But the where I may have a little bit of disagreement in how you are going to approach that. Okay, so yes, you need to align the expectations in terms of what you are trying to accomplish. If you don't have that down, then you are going to have issues later on, because you are going to deliver something that is probably not going to be aligned to your expectations. But how you define the value prop is going to be a question. That one approach could be that, hey, we need to bring down sales, or not sales, obviously. You won't bring down the sales, I guess. You need to bring down cost by whatever, or you need to increase sales. So that could be one KPI. But how do you accomplish that is going to be a question, right? There are going to be so many different variables, and if all of those dependencies cannot be satisfied and people are not comfortable with that, how do you enable? So sometimes that could become a barrier as well, right? That, okay, you have not agreed on all of these underpinnings of how you are going to increase the sale. Yes, you are enforcing that from the top. Hey, I want my targets from tomorrow onwards 20% high. Everybody go run, meet those targets. Now, people are struggling here. You have never communicated, how they are going to meet those numbers. So you need much more concrete plan that is going to be agreed. And that's where the nuts and bolts of those KPIs are far more important. That needs to be discussed, agreed, communicated to people.
Fully agreed there. But again, without having those nuts and bolts agreed with your customers in this example, there's no need to start anything, because you are in all likelihood running into the wrong direction.
Exactly. So again, I mean, see, if your direction itself is wrong, then there's nothing you can do, I guess. So what we like to do is define a rough direction. Okay, don't be too fixated in terms of what you want to accomplish, because at this point of time, you might not know when you say that, okay, my goal is going to be maybe 20% sales increase. If you force that too much, sometimes that force could result into implications. Okay, so what we say is, hey, have a rough guideline, because you don't know whether you are going to achieve the 20%. Build your plan, build your nuts and bolts, and see if that is technically and financially feasible or not. If you have that, then if that is financially or technically feasible, then go for it, by all means. But if that is not feasible, if these nuts and bolts are not necessarily agreeing because your technical or financial feasibility has not been assessed, I guess.
Yeah, that's the we are totally on a, let's say, on a parallel track right now, which is actually quite good. But you have identified a problem. I don't sell enough, so I need to increase it by 20%, which is a fairly easy to measure KPI.
Yeah.
So in order to achieve that, you have a hypothesis. What's wrong? What do I need to improve? And this then becomes, the solving of this then becomes the project. Whether this gives me my 20% or only 5 or 35 doesn't matter at this stage. But based upon what you want to achieve, you need to have a hypothesis. What's wrong? Which is another KPI, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is measured by another KPI. So, and to me, we are always coming back to something that's data-driven, even if it is human, about humans, about people.
Yeah. So again, not disagreeing there. I mean, you need data. Yes, you need data to establish your technical and financial feasibility of the hypothesis as well. But what I'm saying is, a hypothesis is hypothesis.
Yeah.
Hypothesis is not supposed to be a fact. Okay, that is supposed to evolve as you go through the process, is what I'm trying to say. So hypothesis may change completely. Initially, you started with 20%, and tomorrow, once you have gone through the process, it may be 5%, because 5% seems far more reasonable than 20% right now, given your constraints. So yes, you need data, and I don't know, I'm not disagreeing there at all.
So why are we discussing that? Where's our difference?
I don't know. I mean, we have no differences, I guess. We are agreeing way too much.
Man, that's the worst of all cases. You are discussing like heck, and one fully agrees. This is odd. This is really odd. So, but now that we are there, so hypothesis proves wrong. So you're going into a project for whatever reason. Yeah. Do something, and then something really goes wrong. What do you see as mistakes that commonly are done in that case, or in the outset and also in the follow-through?
Yeah, so generally in our case, I think there are going to be a lot of blind spots that nobody knew, nobody could forecast, just because they did not have enough information, visibility into the process. That's where we like to emphasize that do as much due diligence as possible in the front end of the process, which is going to be really digging through your requirements, really digging through your business processes, define architecture, define business rules. So you need to do all of that. So generally, and these are going to be all of the collective assumptions that you are making, in the process, and they are going to come back because somebody assumed something and other people could not counter because they just didn't have enough information, or there was some sort of groupthink because of that. And now we have this situation. Now you have to deal with that. So, I mean, there are always, and that's where I guess, and that's why I'm saying that you need to make the process a little bit of agile. And I hate to use that term, to be completely honest, but you need to have the agile mindset when you are dealing with these things. So again, start with very loose goals. start with the stretch goal. There is no problem in starting with the stretch goal. But as you move through the process, then you are going to discover these constraints for whatever reason. And you are going to discover with every single project. I don't care how big or how small the project is going to be. Every time you are going to have the blind spots. So those blind spots is where the major challenges are. That's what we see generally. And the bigger the project is going to be, if you are going to have something like ERP, obviously you are going to have a lot more blind spots because you are trying to bring everybody together, the whole company, which is much harder than bringing together just one department.
So what you're basically saying is businesses are not doing enough, or well, should relearn the Deming circle: plan, do, check, act. Or
Sorry.
Well, you're basically saying that, well, you said agile, I would say iterative. Do small steps while of a bigger thing. Yeah. So do a step, look whether you went into the right direction, check, adjust course, and do the next step.
Exactly. That is the only way. And that is the only way with these projects. And sometimes estimating the cost, the overarching cost of these projects might be harder as well. So initially you might be thinking that, hey, my budget is $100,000, but your goals might be of $1 million. You don't know this right now. Okay. You are going to feel that, what is that analogy, the monkey jar analogy? You are going to have that tendency that I want as much as possible. So you get into this whole, what is that called, feature rush? So you want to get as many features, as many systems as possible, and you are sort of rushing towards that. And then finally, what you end up getting is, complete misalignment in the expectation, budget, and the constraint that you have. Then you are going to have much harder time. So as long as you have the right expectations from the get-go, you are aligning that and then take the iterative approach that you have mentioned. Because initially, let's say, even if you do everything right and your expectation is going to be that, okay, I'm looking for a project that is going to cost me $100,000. Okay, my requirements scope that we have, that is probably $100,000 as well. But tomorrow it could be 120 versus 100. So now you have that delta. So you have to figure out where you are going to find those $20,000 or whatever project that it could be million, but that is just an example.
Do you think that in any type of technical project that the users are getting involved enough?
Depending upon the management, depending upon the skill set.
What do you see in your projects?
I would say depending upon the maturity of the executive team. If they have done at least 5-6 times, they know how hard it is. They will do it in the right way. They will involve the users as much as possible from the get-go. Because again, going back to the change management issues, right? But I mean, if somebody is going to be super new, 90% of the cases we notice that they are probably going to fail. Just because their expectations are somewhere else. They just underestimate the effort involved with these projects, and they get in trouble just because of them. So I would say it's the maturity of the executive team. How many cycles have they done? And it's not going to be just one executive. Obviously, the person who's leading the project, whether that is going to be sales leader, marketing leader, CEO, depending upon how cross-functional the project is. So obviously, their skill set is going to be important because they are the ones who are sort of aligning all of these, party leaders and bringing them right to one goal. But it is also going to be the skill of these executives who are sort of part of that cabinet because they need to agree, they need to align. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is almost like forming a government, to be completely honest, which is very difficult. We all know this.
So is there too much top-down management then?
Too much of, sorry, what?
Too much top-down management in terms of, I wouldn't say federated management, but kind of collaborative styles?
So we see both cases, okay? So one case is completely hands-off approach, okay? A CEO, he's going to feel or she's going to feel that, this is some sort of technical project. These guys are smart, I've hired Thomas. They should be able to figure these things out. Completely hands off. those cases also result into a problem. Then the second case is going to be that you have a CEO or whoever is leading the project. They are absolutely micromanaging literally every single decision. So that also fires back. So these two are very extreme. So you need to have very balanced approach. And again, depending upon the maturity of the team as well. In our experience, if the team is very mature, meaning you have hired very experienced people, they don't require as much hand-holding. Okay, but if those are not going to be as seasoned, they are going to require a lot more hand-holding. If you don't provide them hand-holding, then they are going to fail. So depending upon the maturity of the team, how much you have invested in your own personal team, okay, are these executives that have 20, 25 years of experience, or are these bunch of interns? And again, both approaches are okay. But then the interns are going to require a lot more hand-holding. So make sure you are allocating some sort of budget for that as well. The question is, okay, which model you are going to choose, what strategy you are going to choose, and what you are going to do around those constraints is what matters. So again, the seasoned leaders who have done this multiple times, they know this game. Okay, they can manage around any constraints. Again, this is going to be, and that's where these things are very difficult, because they do require very deep thinking, very deep strategies around how you are going to manage all of these constraints related to people, skill set, technology, processes, customers, vendors. Oh my goodness.
So if there is a project that you are in which roles are you involved in this project? In an advisory role, or are you usually going in as in an implementation role?
So our business model, the way our company works, is we are pure play advisory. We don't do any sort of implementation. So our role is going to be really advise, strategize. Sometimes we might be involved for the change management, which is a completely different topic depending upon how change management is viewed in the organization. So our role could be to implement whatever state that we had agreed during the strategy selection phase in making sure that gets implemented. So generally our role is going to be, again, pure play advisory. We don't necessarily touch the actual technical implementation, because again, we are dealing with 2,000 different vendors and systems, and we don't have the real technical expertise that somebody who's doing this on a daily basis, they are going to have a lot more. So we like to be very sensitive about that.
Okay, that brings me to Tony's point. There are, well, usually, or often, not usually, often customers in B2B as well as in B2B, they actually don't know what they need. They know what they want. Yeah? It means, in Henry Ford terminology, faster horses instead of a car. Yeah. So how do you approach a situation where you see this?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting situation as well. So let me take my own example. Okay, so let's say if I'm buying a house, and I'm going back to the example that we had discussed earlier. So if I'm going to a real estate agent, what am I going to know? Literally nothing about real estate. I'm going to have these expectations, very high expectations. Okay, I'm probably looking for 7 bedrooms, maybe 4 parkings, maybe a yard, this, that, and then finally they are going to ask, okay, what is your budget? And I'm going to tell them maybe 500,000, maybe 6, maybe $1 million, not more than that. I cannot afford. So now you are going to do the expectation resetting, because it is going to be the job of that real estate agent that, dude, you have no idea what you are talking about. Okay, you need to slow down a little bit. Okay, and you need to reset your own expectations. And that's exactly what you need to do in this case, in this customer's case as well, because they don't necessarily understand the technicals of buying the house. What all things do you need to consider? My priorities are completely based on some sort of wish list, dreams that I have, and I have no idea how much trouble can I cause for myself. Right? So again, it's going to be up to me how receptive I am to let this person do the job. If I'm going to be too pushy that, hey, I have hired you, I'm the boss, you listen to me, I'm paying you your bills, then obviously they will not be able to do the job, right? So in this case as well, the customer, they need to be receptive. They need to understand there is a process of realization. You need to realize your own needs and you have to go through the process. That process sometimes takes a long time because there is a little therapy involved. There's a little training involved. And that's exactly what we do. We take them through the process. First, we teach them the concepts. And sometimes as a user, you need to learn these technical concepts, because unless you learn those, you will never be able to forecast these risks. You will not be able to make an informed decision for yourself. So we take them through this therapy journey. We help them realize their own needs in terms of what they are looking for. And then we ask them, obviously they need to own it. They need to make their own decision. So that's what I guess takes time. So again, in this case, it doesn't matter whether you work with somebody like us or somebody else, but you still have to follow the process. You need to follow the need realization process. And there is, you need to do a lot of things around that until they understand, what they are getting into.
Well, sometimes the needs also get created, right? Nobody thought that they could need an iPhone till it was there. Or
Exactly.
social media. Nobody thought of the need of them being there till they became reality. But looking at the time, it's about time as we are approaching the top of the hour again. It's just going too fast today again. Let's look into our famous oops. What's going on here? What's going on here?
No, I think we are okay now.
Magic.
Yeah, the IT is playing tricks on us. If you are looking at the topic du jour, agentic AI. So, or in general, digital agents in the various business models. So where do you see the best practices for automations across these three models?
So I think the majority of the categories are going to have some sort of flavor of agentic AI. The whole interaction model is going to change. So in general, the challenges that we had in the traditional applications because of UI adoption, they might not be as much, I would say, in the world of agentic AI. So in general, I guess the cases of automation, I don't know, where all we are going to get, but again, 90% of the applications are going to have some flavor of that. A lot of processes that were manually governed, or they required a lot more user inputs, they might not require as many user inputs. The whole interaction model may change. You might not be interacting as much with UI as you were doing in the traditional applications. So now your interaction model could be very text-based. So again, it's very far right now. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It may take, I don't know, maybe 10 years. I don't know how fast the adoption is going to be of agentic AI, but most of the interaction model is definitely going to change the majority of the applications.
How about automation in general?
Depending upon how you define automation, I guess. So maybe you can describe a little bit, how you see automation, and then I can answer that.
Well, on a very high level, there's nobody in front of the UI. There's an objective set, there's a start point, and the system does the rest. Brings you from A to B.
So in our mind, that will be more of the system-to-system interaction. There might be play for system-to-system interaction, but every process, depending upon how the process is structured and designed, you may still require human, just for the governance, just for the quality check. So there could be cases for system-to-system and completely automated processes as well, but there will be cases for humans too. I don't think it's going to be like fully automated. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I think so as well. The next agent that needs to be invented is the CEO agent in my eyes.
Yeah, let's do
the
that.
person that can get automated away. But anyways, thanks a lot for your time and the vivid discussion. So actually, John was right. It's gonna be wild. Thanks to you, Sam, and well, we'll meet again soon.
Of course.
Thanks to all who participated in the discussions. So mainly Tony and John. So it's always good to have you in there. And well, as said, the time flew by. The hour is done.
Gone.
Done and gone, yeah. So only point to remind you, thanks, and saying tune in for next week, or into next week, when we are going into the value of AI, finally AI, for effective advertising, and probably also where and how it's going wrong, with our guest Leslie Walsh. And till then, don't forget to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. Shameless plug here. And well, we'll hope to see you soon again.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much, guys.